And that's the standard. Don't tell me you keep the law imperfectly. The standard is to keep the law perfectly. God is holy, perfect, and just. The law is holy, perfect, and just. You're not. You're vile and putrid and disobedient. And that's the kindest things I can say about you. Okay? I can say worse if you need me to, but I prefer to be a gentleman about this. So, here's the situation. Moses is going to kick the stuffings out of him until he's dead. Why? Moses knows nothing about mercy. Moses only knows the law says this, you violated the law. Here's the penalty. But the one with the holes in his hands comes by and bids him to forbear. Why? Christ suffered the penalty at Moses' hands, is what he's saying, at the law's hands, on the cross, that you should have suffered. For heaven's sakes, once you see it clearly like that, surely you're not going to try to establish your own righteousness again by telling me what a wonderful human being you are and how great your behavior is and how God will judge you in some balance where your good outweighs your bad by 1/4 of an ounce or some nonsense. I listened to a song accidentally on the radio today by Kenny Chesney or somebody, and it was basically the same nonsense you hear. It's kind of a country and western mentality we all live by, and the people who hate country and western, intellectual people, I like to tell them, when they tell me about their own schemes for getting to heaven by their behavior or their wisdom, I always try to remind them that they have a Kenny Chesney sort of philosophy of life, which of course irritates anybody with an education. That they could have some guy like Kenny Chesney and them on the same page makes them nervous, and it should. I don't know what Kenny Chesney does personally, but I know in his songwriting, he's an imbecile. So he says to him here, this funny thing, I see Moses spares none. And Faithful said, I know it very well. It was not the first time he'd ever met with me. Faithful says, 'twas he that came when I dwelt securely at home and disrupted my security when I set out from the city of destruction. What he's saying is, when he heard preaching about not being able to keep the law and about Christ being the only hope that you have to overcome the fact that you haven't kept the law. Remember in James 2:10 it says if a man stumbles with the law on one point, he's guilty of violating the law on all points. He says it was Moses, meaning the law, that woke me up. Now I'm going to close this section by reminding people, if you're a preacher out there especially, the old-fashioned way was to tell people the truth about the law, that they can't get to heaven by works, that they can't get to heaven by what they've done or will do. Today, people don't usually preach that because they think that runs people off. You must give the man Moses before you can give him Christ to come by with the hole in his hands. That's the order. Don't show him the man with the hole in his hands, the man of mercy. He doesn't even know he needs mercy. He has to know that justice is after him now, that justice is being done to him now, that justice is waiting for him now, that justice will punish him eternally. For the man with the hole in his hands to come by and for it to make any sense to him. Please think about that if you're explaining the gospel to people. It was the old-fashioned way. It's not the newfangled way, but the old-fashioned way was right. Thanks.
As I traveled on my journey, few and far between, were the pilgrims I found.
So our Christian and Faithful continue their discourse, and Christian says to him, tell me, did you meet nobody else in the Valley of Humility? And Faithful says, I met with a man named Discontent, you see. And he and Discontent get into a tiff, and here's the reason why. Discontent said to him, it's time to turn back. He says, why? He says, well, you're going to have to lose all of your friends. And he says, well, who are my friends? And John just showed you their faces. Pride, arrogancy, self-conceit, and worldly glory. See, when you're a Christian, you will lose these friends. Pride, self-conceit, worldly glory, and arrogancy. You don't have anything to be prideful about, because all you really can boast about is your sinfulness, which showed you that you needed Christ. Arrogancy, how can you be arrogant? You're a mere speck of dust on the desktop of history. I mean, you are, I try to say to people all the time, your life looks like this to me. You come on the stage left, you soft shoe a little bit, and you go off stage right. History is about God, about His existence. It's not about you. It's not about me. We're mere snowflakes as it is in a giant storm. Anything that would make you be arrogant is something you ought to be ashamed of. You will lose these friends. Self-conceit. People want to boast to me all the time. Not only of how well they do something, they want to tell me how well I do it. And you know what? Sometimes I like to hear it because I'm very foolish. Wise men know better. Men that are much wiser than Bill Moore don't listen to that nonsense. Praise can be a very hard climate to live in. It's much easier when you have a lot of enemies and a lot of criticism. It keeps you humble. Humility is something today that very few people have any time for and any value for, and the Bible has nothing but a high regard for. Humility. Why? Humility once was described by Charles Spurgeon as a right view of yourself and a right view of God. That'll humble you right there. You're inconsequential. He's glorious. If you can get that straight, when you reverse it, remember Voltaire said, God made man in His image, and man returned the favor. If you have a God in your mind who's very much like you, you're an imbecile. Now, that's the nicest thing I can say about you, because that might even allow for a little bit of insanity to be in your defense. If you're a thoughtful person, and you've decided that God is slightly better than you, but not dramatically different, then you're a fool, which is a worse case than being an imbecile. I know I was such a fool. I not only thought he wasn't much better than I thought he wasn't at all. Now, I've learned and repented of that stupidity and foolishness, but occasionally I still have a tendency to make God all too earthly, when in fact He's anything but. So I want you to think about this as I continue here with this, that they're going to continue this discussion, and they have this thing. Honor goes with humility. Do you believe that? Honor goes with humility, and pride goes before a fall. All the mothers out there, you've certainly quoted that to your children before, that pride goes before a fall. But you don't believe it yourself. You're proud of a lot of things, maybe your Christian behavior. The last section, I was telling you can't be saved by your behavior, but we're often trying to be kept by our behavior. Listen, if you're a Christian, your best behavior is like a swimming pool that somebody has urinated in. You understand? The best you can do, if somebody told you that they'd urinated in your swimming pool, you don't want to go swimming. I'm telling you, that's what you're trying to tell God, that I have a swimming pool, and it's basically a good swimming pool. I've just urinated in it. Well, it wouldn't please God to have to deal with that swimming pool, nor would it please you. Please do not try to tell me that your behavior is viewed by God somehow as being perfect behavior now that you are a Christian. Your behavior as a Christian is still tainted. I'll agree with you, it's not as wicked as it once was, but it's also not free of wickedness. Understand? It's not free of it. It has to be perfect to be pleasing to God on its own, and you will never have one moment of absolute perfection this side of death. You'll only achieve perfection in your behavior when you die. There you go. Now, where can you get all those kind of images and truthfulness like that? In a half-hour show in Loami, Illinois. There you go. John's trying not to laugh at me, but I'm trying to give you an image of just how pitiful your behavior is according to the Bible. Now, he goes on, and finally they get into discussion, and it ends with this. He says, look, the man that loves Christ is richer than any man who loves this world. A single man living in under the bridge, the Wells Street Bridge in Chicago. That man is richer if he loves Christ than any man who owns the, 1,000 feet of lakefront in Chicago. Listen, it is nonsense to worry about what you own in this world. I want to know what you own in the next world. Remember in Luke 16, the rich man had his good things in this world. The beggar who the dog licked his sores had his good things in the next world. And the things in the next world the beggar had forever. The man in this world had them momentarily. Now, do you want to be that man who's rich towards God for eternity, or do you want to be that man who's rich in a few perishing goods in this temporary world? It's really clear-cut, folks. There's distinctions between these two worlds. There's choices between these two worlds. And you have to make them. And I have to make them. And we have to live it out. So please don't be the type of person who acts like this is I'm not quite sure on the spectrum of things. There aren't spectrums, folks. There are ends of this spectrum. There's the spectrum going to heaven, and there's the spectrum of going to hell. If you are not going to heaven, you're already on your way to hell. Please judge yourself accordingly. Do what's right for yourself in this world. Don't you care for your soul? I try to do these shows, and I'm not an educated person. I'm not a trained person. I am what I am, a person who cares about these things because it's personal to me. And I care about what happens to you. I wish I cared even more about what happens to you. But I try to be honest with you. I try to cut through the crud with you. Why? Your soul's at risk. It seems a shame that I should care more about your soul than you do. There's something wrong with that. Please tune in next week, and we'll see if I can give you a couple examples of it. Thanks.